Most people in the world don't know what it's like to put themselves out there as an artist. Releasing music is scary. There's a level of vulnerability. You're putting your hopes and dreams out there for all to see, your thoughts and ideas and your creativity. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about 7 ways to feel more confident about your music. Let's get to it.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
Welcome to episode number 306 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, where on this episode, we're going to be talking about 7 ways to feel more confident about your music. My name is Kevin Bruner, and joining me is Chris Robley. Chris, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm excited. We're going to preach to the choir here. We're going to preach, not to the choir. We're going to preach to ourselves. That's what this is, a pep talk to ourselves.
With some good advice as well, I think.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if it works.
Yes, because releasing music is scary. And, you know, one of the things that we highlighted in the Music Marketing 101 episode, it was things you should expect when you market your music. And what I liked about that segment is we came up with a lot of things that really point to the feelings and emotions an artist experiences when they market their music. Yes, there are the things like the excitement of having a new release and, you know, usually fresh photos and design and all that you're excited about and new tracks. But then there's this thing of rejection or the feeling of rejection, because even in a successful marketing campaign where 20% of the people might open your email and 3% click through, that's considered amazing responses. There's still a lot of people that didn't care. And the idea is artists, we tend to focus on those things, or that one bad review. I got to hunt that person down and find them. And so I think this episode is going to speak to a lot of the things about releasing music, feeling confident, understanding the correct ways to get positive feedback, or correct feedback, I should say.
Yeah, and you had pointed out that the list of things to expect in marketing, those are things you should brace for no matter whether your marketing is successful or a complete flop. They're going to pan out to be true regardless of your results. And I think a lot of these are sort of similar things, but instead of about marketing, it's about your own just enjoyment and appreciation of your journey as an artist. And I think these pitfalls are there, again, whether things are going great or terrible in our music career.
Yeah. Quick reminder, if you are listening on Spotify or YouTube or Apple podcast app or any podcast app, please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, a thumbs up would be great. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel there. And, you know, hitting that share button helps the podcast as well. We would appreciate that. And Chris, before we dive into the episode, the DIY Musician Conference, things are heating up. We've got some big announcements coming up. I'm super excited about the keynotes that we've locked in, the speaker announcements that we have coming. All those are going to be rolling out in the next couple of weeks. We're gearing up for a big podcast preview. But if you were listening to this and you don't have your tickets yet, go to DIYmusiciancon.com, get your tickets. Right now, they're just $149. That price will go up very soon, so don't wait. And even better yet, you're going to want to stay at the Hilton where all the action is. If you book 2 nights or more at the Hilton, we will give you that conference ticket for free. And all the details are on the conference website. It's going to be an amazing event, especially after it'll be 3 years since our last conference. And we've been through COVID, and it's time to really chart a new course for our music careers. So much has changed. And so many great topics, from music production to music marketing to booking tours to artist management. So much good stuff is happening there.
And some favorites from years past will be back. We're trying some really new, exciting things. There'll be awesome parties and concert opportunities. It's going to be
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you cannot make it to Austin, or you can't travel or don't want to travel, it will be a hybrid event. So that one ticket will get you access to The majority of all the main content will be live streamed, but you have to have a ticket to get access to it. And there'll be some special sessions and things online for people that attend remotely. So if you want access to the content and you can't make it to Austin, still get that ticket and you can be a part of the event. So whether you're in Austin in real life or watch virtually from anywhere in the world, $149, DIYmusiciancon.com. It's going to be exciting and fun, and I can't wait. And in August in Austin, it will not be cold, and I'm so tired of the cold. I'm in the Northwest, and it still feels like winter up here.
When you said things are heating up at the conference, I was like, quite literally.
Yeah, see, that's how my marketing brain
Austin
works,
in
Chris.
August.
It all just comes together.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and be on the lookout for speaker announcements in the next week or two, and then the full schedule will be in the week or two after that.
Yep. Yes, indeed. So again, DIYmusiciancon.com. Get your tickets. And the last public service announcement, if you are hearing this the first week this episode comes out, that distribution plus free music video deal is still going on at CD Baby. Head on over to cdbaby.com, sign up a track, sign up an album, and you will get a free music video credit from Rotor Videos to make an amazing music video to go along with your release. So all the details are at cdbaby.com.
And that offer expires June 27th, 2022, because, people will be listening to this for years to come. So that expires very soon.
Yes, indeed. All right. So we have, we're going to talk about the realities you face when you put yourself out there as an artist. And we're going to talk about, some of the things that we deal with as artists, like imposter syndrome, writer's block, all that kind of stuff. And then we have some calls and emails. And while we're talking, if something pops in your mind that I need to call in and weigh in on this subject, or I have a question, our listener line is 360-524-2209, or you can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. We love getting your calls and emails and sharing them on the show. And that'll be up later in this episode. All right, so let's dive in. 7 ways to feel more confident about your music. And we talked a little bit about the genesis of this idea, and it started with a blog article that you created. Do you have any more background for us, Chris?
No, besides you and I try to vary our content between things that are very nitty gritty about one particular platform or marketing tactic, and then we do some stuff that's related to CD Baby services. We have sort of a balanced diet of content. And every once in a while, we just want to do something that gets to the sort of the emotional reality of being an artist and say, we know it's hard. It can suck. It can also be great, but we get it. And here's some things that as we've gotten older, maybe, dealt with some of the challenges, we've got some things that have worked for us to get us back on track when things feel just crappy, as they inevitably will when you make music throughout your whole life. So
yeah,
this is one episode.
And I, looking at this list, every time I release music and go through the creation and release process, I think I experience all these things. So let's dive in. Number one,
don't compare yourself, because as they say, comparison is the thief of joy. And there's a lot of ways we compare ourselves. The thing that I'm guilty of, or particularly was in my 20s, and it led to a lot of sort of bitterness, was comparing where I was at in my musical career with artists that I didn't like, not personally, but I just didn't like their music. And I'd be like, why is that shitty band playing at this venue all the time that won't even call me back? And like, why is this band like the Willamette Week's artist of the year? And like, all these things, like, oh, things are going great for them, but I think they suck. What the hell? So that was my form of comparison that really held me back. But I think a lot of artists also do the thing where they compare their music to their favorite artists, their heroes. And that can be instructive in a way, but there's a point at which when you do it too much, you're just going to start to feel like crap about yourself, because you are not your heroes. They're your heroes for a reason, but you might be just as talented, but maybe in a slightly different way, because you're unique. You're not going to do the same exact thing as your heroes. And so you're going to miss the target if that's your target. And then one thing I like to remind people of is your heroes are your heroes because you weren't sitting in the room with them and you weren't in their brain when they made that music. For them, the magic is gone. The mystery is gone. At some point, it became the output of a process. And unless you're like Prince, who claimed he only listened to his own music or whatever, like most artists want
I
to
don't
just,
believe him.
yeah, right. But most artists want to just kind of put out the music and move on to the next thing. They've lost the sense of inspiration that led to that. And for you, hearing it, it's all magic to you because you didn't make it. And the same thing can be true in reverse. The music you make that doesn't feel magical to you can be, mysterious and really emotionally impactful for someone else. But we very quickly forget that because we move on and we also just are so close to our own process.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in any creative process, whether music or anything you do on the creative level, is you see the behind the scenes stuff that happens to make it come together, and everyone else is just hearing it for what it is, and they don't know that process. And so yeah, that magic is there. It's interesting. One of the things that I've done is like, you go through the creation process, especially for an album. You've heard the songs. By the time the mix and mastering is done, you've heard the songs 1,000 times, and you're like, I hate all of this. It's like I've heard it so much, and you've seen the little changes, the nuance changes, but everyone else doesn't perceive it that way. So what I've done to help kind of restore the magic is, after a while, I'll just set everything aside, and then months go by, the music's out, and it's usually around the time when we're going to play some shows that I'll pull it back out and I'll listen, and I hear it with fresh ears, because I'll be like, how on earth did I get that guitar sound? I don't even remember. How, man, this is really cool. I mean, and you hear it in a different level, and I think it helps restore some of that mystery and magic to it. I mean, you're always going to be so close to it, it's hard to separate yourself, but I think that's helpful sometimes to just go back. And one of the points you had here that you didn't hit on was, has your music improved over time? Be proud. And that's one of the things I like to take stock in. Everyone is on a different time and different journey, time trajectory and different journey. Some people, things just click and happen really fast. Other people, it's a 20-year success story. And so I think ultimately, as an artist, you just have to look at your journey and just take time to go, man, I've grown a lot. I'm making some of the best music ever. I really am proud of where I've come from.
Yeah.
And if you're comparing yourself just to other people, comparison will be the thief of joy. So don't rob yourself of the joy of the fact that you had ideas in your brain, you turned them into something that people could listen to, and the fact that you did that is awesome in of itself, because most people on planet Earth that have lived through time will never ever do that.
Yeah, well, so when we say basically only compare yourself to yourself and measure the progress that may have happened, that's great. But there's even a way in which that can start to not serve you. And we get this question a lot when artists are like, my sound is so much better now. I've gotten so much better. Should I take my old music down? And so that kind of comparing yourself to yourself can be detrimental because, again, the magic that's there in your music that you don't feel anymore can still be heard by everyone else. And I have people who write me and are like, man, I love your first solo album. And now, like, however many years later it is, I'm like, ooh, like, yeah, I can see that it was decent. But to me, that's the last album I want to recommend to everyone. But my fans aren't wrong when they say that that's the one that they fell in love with and they're still attached to. So, yeah, anyways, I'm just rambling, but
Yeah.
sometimes comparing yourself to yourself can be bad too.
Yeah. All right. Number two. And we also had a subheader for this one, like what I wish I'd known years ago when starting my music career. But number two, what do we got here, Chris?
Yeah, you have to love what you create. And I don't mean this in a lie to yourself and just convince yourself everything you do is genius. If you can improve, obviously you want to be clear-eyed about that and make improvements as you develop as an artist. But really what I mean by love what you create is don't copy other people, don't chase trends, particularly, well, for a few reasons. If it's not authentic to you, if you're not genuinely enthusiastic about making that kind of music, you're going to burn out. You're not going to be proud of it. It's going to feel weird. but also by the time you catch up to a trend, it's always moved on. So if you think, copying Lizzo right now, or I don't even know, someone newer than Lizzo, someone in 2022, you start copying them. By the time your album's finished and the world has moved on. So even from like a business marketing perspective, it's a terrible idea. And I've had a couple friends who built an audience and their career was going very well, and they got managers involved. And these were managers who came in and said, like, we're going to take things to the next level. I just need you to make a few tweaks to your sound. And they'd come in with like a template, like they'd have a Spotify playlist of 5 or 10 songs and be like, I need you to do all these things that Adele is doing. Or, that was one of the people that was on this list at the time. And because this was a professional industry expert who had a plan, had connections, had resources, the artists did what they were asked. They became a team player and they tried to craft music that fit that mold and that template. And it didn't work exactly. I mean, the music's decent. It wasn't like terrible music, but it didn't lead to the results that either the manager or the artist expected. And ultimately the artist moved on and was like, I want to get back to my roots. And now there's this whole like phase of 2 or 3 years of their life and their creative output that was put towards something they couldn't 100% stand behind. So, and that's happened a couple times to friends of mine. So don't do that.
Yeah, and one thing I would highlight in what you just said, and like love what you create, love what you do, and really tap into what you think is the special sauce that you provide in musical creation and output. Because what you're saying doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be successful. You might chase trends and find success, but our episode is about 7 ways to feel more confident about your music. And I've seen it so many times where artists chase a trend and might even see some success and they're like, this isn't who I am. This isn't what I want to do. And I think especially, going back quite a few years when VH1 used to have the Behind the Music series, that theme would come up a lot. Like, we were seeing success, but this wasn't who we were. This wasn't what we wanted to create. We were chasing trends. And so we're not talking about whether or not you're successful with this. We're talking about how you feel about the music you're creating because, you can create music that's popular that you hate. And lots of artists do it. But this is about the idea of like loving what you do, because if you love what you do, I think that's going to be infectious with your fans. It's going to connect with the people that you want to connect with. And also, it's that self satisfaction because at the end of the day, when you're doing a creative endeavor, you want to set something there and go, yeah, I made that. I did that. I'm excited about it. I love what I just did. It doesn't matter if anyone else loves it. I love it. That's why I made it.
Yeah. Well, the world doesn't need second rate versions of artists. It already has. It needs you to be yourself. And like, this probably sounds like maybe a little naive, but like in a way, God forbid you get super famous for doing something you don't love, because maybe that's dumb. Maybe that gives you resources and an audience where you can then develop and evolve and finally do what you want. But like, I do think it becomes a trap for a lot of people. So you
Yeah.
might as well just make the music you want to make.
And this is different from having influences and people that you really like what they're doing. We're not saying don't have influences, don't have artists that you're like, I like these records and I want creatively to go in this direction. That's different. We're talking about feeling like you have to jump on the bandwagon on a trend, copy, imitate to the point where you're not being an artist anymore. You're just trying to hijack a trend, which lots of people try to do. And honestly, this is one of the things, number one, number two, that we've just said, that the comparison is a thief of joy and love what you create. Something I had to deal with as an artist. When I started playing guitar, it was still the era of the guitar heroes, all these mega guitar players that could play 1,000 notes per second and go up and down the neck. And that's just not my musical gifting, both with how I think about music and even just my finger dexterity. Then I went to Nashville to college, and that's in your face even more. And you're going to school for guitar, and that's what everybody does. And it's like, that's not really me. And I've at some point had to come to the realization of who I was as a guitar player, what I thought I did that was uniquely me and I could do well, and be okay with it, and then just lean into it and know that this is what I do, and not being able to do those other things, that's okay. That's okay.
Well, maybe the flip side of doing what you love is embracing your limitations. It sounds like that's what you did. You're like, I'm never going to be Eric Johnson or Steve Vai, so I'll be more like, I don't know, David Gilmour, someone who just knows I play pretty slow, but I can sure make some great riffs and melodies. I'm sure Tom Waits like pretty quickly realized he wasn't going to sing opera. So he leaned into what his deficiencies were in a way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, you started to highlight something that I think leans into number 3. So let's hit into number 3.
Please get trusted opinions before you say something's finished. That could be your recordings, your songwriting, your marketing, your band photos. Before you put things out into the world, the time to get that feedback, seek some expert counsel, ask your trusted friends for their advice. Do it early so that you have time to make any adjustments. And I don't always mean that you need to take their advice. You should simply seek some outside opinions because, again, we're so close to our music, our image, our face, our whatever, the copy we write in our bios. It really, really helps to get an outside person to be like, that's awkward. That's boring. Cut half that out. Whatever it is, you want to do that beforehand. And when you get the advice, I always think it will register as either true or false deep down in you. And if it confirms that little like suspicious part that maybe you'd been burying because you just want to finish the thing, then take the advice, slow down and fix whatever it is you're working on. If you get the advice and you say, nah, screw that, I'm doing this anyways, well, then good. You at least did this process and you can move and put something out with confidence that you at least sort of did a gut check.
I think the question for a lot of artists is, how do I get useful feedback on my music? And I think, what you were just saying there, you want to get some input or feedback, or, maybe a sounding board is a good way of putting it, in that you're so close to it that you have these feelings. And if someone sort of resonates, like, or highlights something that you were kind of thinking was the case, it might be true. If other people are just like, feel off base, maybe their opinion isn't worthwhile. But you also have to understand where the opinions are coming from. Like, my mom will never tell me if a song is bad. So so that feedback is not useful. So I think it's important for artists to have good friends, or people that will tell you the truth, but also understand that it's a creative process and that they can give you valuable feedback.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to get feedback. If it's songwriting, there are songwriting groups that exist. You could start one with 3 or 4 other writers and once a month get together and trade your newest songs. If it's recording, you may be working with an engineer or a producer, bandmates, whatever it is, that can give you feedback kind of in real time. But then even when you're done with maybe a rough mix, you just send it off to some other people who you trust. Same thing with designs. Like whenever an album, if I'm paying a designer to do an album cover or something, I don't always sit with my first reaction. Like I'll wait 2 or 3 days, maybe a week. And I think that's probably good to do with most things. Just sit on it, then come back to it.
Yeah. I usually take the screw it, I don't care what you think approach.
I've invested too much time in this.
Your level of genius is clearly not matched with mine.
Well, that kind of delusion is good for progress, Kevin.
Yes,
Your output is
I
served
think,
by that.
but artists, we are tend to be the type that, oftentimes we deal with imposter syndrome, or we feel very vulnerable with this thing we just created. And so sometimes we're scared to get feedback because it can hurt, and maybe feel like it's more targeted at who we are as a person as opposed to just the track that person heard. One thing I think is not helpful, like the opposite of get trusted opinions, is there used to be websites that would be like, hey, we'll give you feedback on your music. And this is a great way to workshop demos and stuff. And over the years, multiple of these sites had reached out to CD Baby, like, hey, let's do a partnership. I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. And I tried a couple of them. They would say, hey, try it out. And I thought it was really stupid and unuseful, because they were just sending sometimes demos and things to just random music fans. And a random music fan is not somebody that understands the whole creation process. They don't understand the vision. So if you're sending demos out to your fans, you might get mixed feedback and feel frustrated by it, or random music like a website that just has random music fans listen to it. You're like, you don't know who these people are. They don't necessarily have a vision in your head of like the end product or how this is going to turn out. That's not their place in the music ecosystem. And so I think that feedback can be very problematic.
Yeah, I'm imagining like a noise rock or ambient or like avant-garde jazz artist submitting music and then people being like, "I don't hear a hook," or something like this. Like, well, your context is way off base, but
Yeah, and some of those review sites that I had used, it'd be like, "This sounds okay for what it is, but I don't like this kind of music." I'm like, "Well, then why your opinion means nothing to me." So I think when we say get trusted opinions, I think, there's people, whether it's in your local scene, other bands you've played with, other artist friends, maybe even a club booker that you've built a relationship with, or even a manager. They should be able to understand, maybe what you're going for, or they can give some feedback, but you need to put it in context, and ultimately just looking for ways to, does this does this kind of tap into what I was already feeling? If yes, then maybe there's something there.
yeah, well, the last thing I'll say about this is sometimes, particularly for solo artists like me, like it can feel a little bit like you're working in a vacuum or a silo or something. So every time I have workshopped a song or worked with a producer or mixing engineer who can deal with the problems up front, and so when it's done, they're also enthusiastic about the results, I can just be way more confident about what I'm putting out, which is good because otherwise I feel like it's just me and I don't know what's going to happen when I put something out. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
just be wary of opinions from people that wouldn't like what you do anyway, or aren't a potential fan, because there's lots of music that's very popular that if you put in front of me and said, "What's your opinion on this?" I'm like, "I hate it." So, but I was,
I
but I'm
wasn't your
not your,
target audience
I'm
anyways.
not your target audience. So,
Yeah.
doesn't matter what I think. Go do it. And sometimes everyone is wrong because sometimes people don't know what they like until they've had a few times to listen to it. You're talking about not chasing trends, but new trends emerge from somewhere, and someone has to be someone to kind of forge a path into new areas.
I mean, if someone asked me what I thought of Who Let the Dogs Out before it came out, I would have said, like, "What dogs? I don't care who let them out. This is annoying." And clearly I would have been wrong. So
If I have to hear another second of this song, I'm going to scream. And then you heard it a million times everywhere you went for like 3 years straight.
I'm noticing now our next point is similar to the last one, which is that number 4, you can be more confident about your music when you collaborate. So this is a little bit different from you making something on your own and then asking people for feedback, sounding board advice. It's more about simply just being in the creative process with someone else because you don't have to be an expert at everything yourself. If you're not a great beat maker, but you're great at top line melodies, well, cool. Work with someone who can produce. If you're not a great lyricist, but you can write great melodies, whatever, just find someone who complements you for the skills you don't have. Work with them. This can kind of be like a Voltron of talents. So the end result is better than what either of you could do alone. But the other thing, it has the benefit of basically doubling the reach of your music. Because if this person is an artist or producer or remixer who has their own audience, well, suddenly your music gets to reach their fans as well.
And this is one thing I also had to learn about myself, that like I thrive in a band situation or a collaboration situation. I am not the person like you, Chris, that can play an enormous amount of instruments, write songs all by yourself, sing them, and produce and whatever. I have to be in a collaborative situation, otherwise I feel completely stuck. But to me, this is one of the joys of being in a band and the creative process, because for example, on our last album, the lead off track, it was a music idea that I had. I almost didn't even play for the guys because I thought, this doesn't sound, I don't think they'll like it. This doesn't sound like a small town poets song. I don't know if I'll show it to them. It ended up being one of the tracks that people say is one of their favorites off the album, one of the favorites that we've ever done. And I was just like, wow, if I hadn't just given, like, presented it to them, let them hear it and collaborate with them on it, it would have been a missed opportunity. So I think some of those things where you're questioning whether or not something's good, other people hear it and go, yeah, this is great. Let's do it. And it
Mhm.
turns into something much bigger and better than you could have done yourself.
Yeah, the other thing I like about collaboration, it sounds a little bit like what you were going through when you sort of gave up ownership to a group, is that it frees you, the individual, from like the burden of being a genius or something. It's like you no longer have to be wholly inspired by yourself to do something that gets judged. And that judgment reflects only on you as the sole creator. Like when you collaborate, you can kind of embrace the idea that art is more of a, I don't know, craft. There's craftsmanship, there's sort of a technical process, and the back and forth of building something with someone. It's like, oh, well, again, I can feel more confident this is good because a bunch of experts work together on it. So now when I play it live, I'm all the more confident to just deliver it. And I'm not like when I play my own songs, I'm like, does anyone like this? What do they think of this lyric? How does it, it's just, it reflects on you less in a way, which I think can be very freeing, particularly as a performer.
Yeah, and then if everyone says, "No, this song sucks," you go like, "Well, it was a great idea until they took it and messed it all up."
Well, yeah, there's that Elizabeth Gilbert TED talk we've probably mentioned before where she says like the idea of the genius in the ancient Roman and Greek world was that the muse visited you and either blessed you with this amazing art that you're like the conduit for, or cursed you with some terrible art. But either way, you're not responsible. You're just like this vector for divine intervention. So in a way, that was like probably very good for those people's souls because they couldn't take the credit in a way that made them like tortured assholes. But then they also were like, win some, you lose some.
That reminds me of when I was in Nashville going to college, music business school. The Christian music industry is hubbed in Nashville, and that's what I came up through with small town poets. And I remember one of my professors saying that songwriters would come to him because he had this professor had a big publishing company and say, God gave me this song. And he would say, well, you know what? God gave you a dog of a song. Just so that idea, yes, I'm just a conduit. I'm just doing what's been given to me. It
It
is
can be
it is
healthy.
weird. Yeah, yeah. Now, the last thing I'll say, I think as an artist in this area, that's what I loved about the Beatles documentary that was just out.
Yeah.
It's still available. That came out around Christmas. And even like when I see an artist that I like and seeing behind the scenes of their creative process and really understanding that, what, these people that I look at as creative geniuses, their process is messy. There's stuff that just sucks. There's stuff that really works. There's stuff that's not working for a long time. And then suddenly it starts clicking. And it really inspired me in the creative process. And I've seen artists like you two over the years. It's like those guys need each other. The magic is when all of them work together and not what each of them do individually. So I think when you dive into some of these things and look at the processes your favorite artists go through, I think it can be very inspiring in the sense that they're humans. There's stuff that they do that isn't good. There's stuff that they do that is great, and there's stuff that they worked really hard that felt like they should have given up on that actually becomes one of their biggest hits.
Yeah. And just a plug for the podcast, about probably 20 or 30 episodes ago, Christina Cano and I dissected that movie and we did, like 10 lessons you can learn from the Beatles Get Back. So if you're
Excellent
interested,
film.
go listen
If
to that.
you've not seen, listen to that episode of the podcast, watch that Beatles documentary. It's really, really great. All right, number 5.
Be a lifelong learner. And this, like most things we're talking about, can apply to a lot of things. You can pick up new marketing tricks. You can learn how to engineer your own music if maybe you have always had someone else do that. It can also just be about sitting down and learning a new cover song, working on your chops. There's just a lot of ways to think about it. But particularly in terms of songwriting for me, I notice that whenever I like sit at the piano and learn like a new song where the chords are just slightly challenging for me, once I get it, I'm like, oh, I see how I can now start using that in my own music. So it's just a way to stay inspired, to keep your music changing and improving. Because the other thing that happens, if you don't do this, you're inevitably going to become one of those like crusty people who, even when you're I've seen young people doing this, like they're 25 and they're like, no one makes good music anymore. I'm like, are you insane? You're 25. Like, you're like, normally 60-year-olds say crap like that. Like, open your ears and learn something new. So you don't get stodgy and crusty. Those types of people, those types of artists tend to start making the same albums over and over and over again. And that gets boring, even if it's all quality. You don't want to hear 3 or 4 albums of the same exact production style and songwriting angle and stuff. So keep learning.
You know, when you were saying that, it made me think I've always wondered why there's bands that will have a couple of albums, maybe they're slightly popular, then they have a breakout hit album. And they might have a follow-up that's amazing as well, but then they get so big, it's like it feels like they can't write relevant music anymore, and they put out album after album that nobody knows exists, but they just want to hear their hits from
Mm-hmm.
the early days. And part of me is wondering, is it because they have so much money and access to resources that they stop learning, they stop growing? I don't know. That to me, that might be a part of the the puzzle there, or maybe they're just not hungry for it anymore, and so you get lazy. I don't know, but I think this is one of those things. Whenever you're lacking confidence in what you're doing, I think sometimes that also flows into the feeling of inspiration. It's like pick up a new instrument, just mess with some new sounds, just force yourself into some situations that you wouldn't normally to get yourself out of that rut. And a lot of times there's like this inspiration and this excitement and this feeling like, yeah, I do actually know how to do cool stuff and have some cool sounds and create great melodies. And so I think when you are a lifelong learner, you're constantly putting yourself in situations where you force yourself to grow, which drives inspiration, which drives confidence in what you're doing.
Yeah, and probably if you are an artist who's had some measure of success, it probably keeps you from slipping into like, what do you call it, when your audience is like, oh, they're just like old fashioned. If you just sort of keep learning stuff, you'll be able to soak up inspiration from people who are younger than you and doing new things. Maybe they look up to you, but you can look down to them. That's not the right phrase, but yeah, just stay relevant, I guess, when you learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Being on a path of feeling like you're growing drives confidence. The last thing I'll say about that, like as a guitar player, for a while, everybody was building these mega pedal boards that they towed around to shows to only turn 2 pedals on and off. And I thought, you know what? This is insanity. I'm not even using half these pedals. I'm going to strip it down to like 3 essential pedals and force myself to get creative in how I use each of these to get through the show or whatever I'm playing, and force creativity. And man, when I did that, I felt super confident what I was doing. I felt inspired. I felt excited, and I felt like I was growing. And to me, that was just one way of putting that into practice.
Well, you know my rule. If there's reverb in the amp, then no one needs more than some kind of overdrive and a delay. Anything more?
I could buy that. I don't even need the reverb. I hardly ever use reverb because I love delay. And I think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just say that as a ridiculous rule. I don't mean it, but I've seen plenty of amazing musicians get away with just those things.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Number 6.
Walk away so that you can one fine day return with a new sense of energy and inspiration. There's the sort of the cliche story of the eureka moment where fancy scientist is working on some math problem. What is it? Archimedes can't figure it out. His wife tells him to go take a break. He sits in the bath, and then the volume of water displacement, whatever, he has the moment. The whole mystery of this math problem unlocks just because he took a break, let his brain relax, and then maybe be open to different kind of stimulus. So I've taken breaks in my own music making, and I've shifted to poetry. Sometimes I just shift away from art altogether, and I try to learn about random other things I'm interested in. And when I come back to music, I always have just a ton of energy because I rested, recharged the batteries. But I think also like you can get your life in order in a way, like strained band relationships or, paying attention to your family, all the like making sure you're in a good spot in life, well rested, healthy, like that can aid you as well and make sure your creativity is at 100%. And
How are you gonna write good songs if everything's good?
that's a whole other episode. If you can't write songs when you're happy, you don't have any imagination. The last thing I was gonna say is when you go and you take a break from your art, you can absorb all these experiences, different sources of knowledge that you can then bring back to your music. So you can now write lyrics about other things you've lived through or learned. So I think breaks are very important, and I think we're terrified to take them because we feel like time is ticking. If I don't make music for 6 months or a year, like someone else is going to get ahead. I'm going to lose my connection with my fan base. So I get it's terrifying to think about losing momentum in that way. But if the alternative is that you just keep going and it leads to burnout, your break is going to be a lot longer.
Yeah, I think this is great advice. And one way it played out in my life, I finished my fourth year in college and literally like the next week got a call from the guys in Small Town Poets wanting me to try out. And, next thing I know, I'm on tour, we're getting signed, all these amazing things are happening. But it went from 0 to 100 instantly for 3.5 years straight, where I was just like, completely burnt out. And all of us had kind of started drifting, and the band kind of took a hiatus. And I thought I was done with music just because it was so intense. And I just took a break. I thought I was done and ended up in the Northwest. And then I just started like writing more music than I'd ever written before in my life. It just was like this gush of creativity. And I was so inspired. I'd be there writing, recording every day for hours on end, just idea after idea. And it really set the stage for the next chapter of my music career, which ultimately led me to CD Baby. But it was one of those things where I thought I was done. I felt guilty for setting it down, but for my creativity, it was an explosion after that because I just needed a break and I needed to be okay with it.
Well, and this leads a little bit into the last point we wanted to make. But so you took that break. When you came back, you were doing sort of individual or, well, I know you were working with other people, but it wasn't Small Town Poets. It was like a different context, which led you to more ambient, what
Yeah.
would you call that stuff?
Yeah.
Post rock kind of stuff and sync licensing opportunities, plus your
Yep.
job at CD Baby. But then, even beyond all that change and evolution in your life, you then got back together with Small Town Poets. So the break was clearly needed for everyone. And when you came back
Yes.
here, you still take your music seriously and do cool things. So
Yeah. And I think for me, I'm somebody that always feels like they have to be doing something productive. It's a blessing and a curse because it's
you're a
hard for
pro-
me to.
you're a Protestant American, right? So
Yeah, yeah, it's hard for me to ever relax. So the idea of, I didn't play my guitar today. Oh, I feel super guilty. Oh, I'm never going to be a musician again. Those kind of things go through my head, but it's like when I come back to it, I feel so inspired and just have a season of creativity and output that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I think as artists, we just need to be okay with that. If you're lacking confidence in what you're doing, maybe just set it aside for a minute, knowing that you're doing it to rest, to recharge, to have some new inspiration and all that.
yeah, and taking that break doesn't have to be threatening when you take it because the seventh thing we want to mention is you're going to commit to music as a lifelong project. So, like in Kevin's case, you took a break, you came back, and then you even started working with that same band again. If you know just deep down that no matter what, you're always going to be involved in music in some way, you don't have to pursue it the exact same way your whole life. But if music's always going to be an important part of your life, less is riding on any one thing. And that can be really freeing. It can kind of free you up to have just joy again. Like, I'm going to put out an album. And if it flops, well, who cares? I'll make another one. And I don't really mean that flippantly. Like, of course I care. I want people to like it. I want it to go somewhere. But literally, if it doesn't, I'm not going to quit. So I just really like acknowledging that I will be making music for the rest of my life. The less pressure there is on any one particular thing to like deliver massive results, the more fun I have.
Yeah, it was this emotional moment for us as a band, Small Town Poets. We were back in Memphis. So this was a handful of years ago, recording an album where we had recorded our first couple albums that did well, and not knowing like what would happen with it if we were going to keep making music at this point. And we'd already released a bunch of independent projects, but life it makes it hard sometimes. This is to keep creating and keep making this a reality album after album. And one of the guys in the band shared a story about his dad who had been in this same barbershop quartet with these same guys, and they were all in their 80s now, still getting together to sing and saying, that's how I view this band. No matter what, we're going to continue to make music together, whether we're playing massive tours or it's just for us. This is a lifelong pursuit. And he was really kind of highlighting how his dad had had this relationship with these musicians for years and it was always a part of their lives. And I'm like, that's the right perspective because, I've always said a music career is a lifelong pursuit. It has its high highs and it can have its low lows. And you just got to accept that. And one of the things I love about music is you never know when success is going to happen. So even that album that you may be disappointed with the response to, 2 years later, something can click and have explosive growth around it, or your catalog can just start growing over time to the point of like, hey, this is really snowballing into something. But either way, whether or not it's massive success or feeling like indefinite obscurity, I'm going to be making music. So I just need to rest in the fact that this is a part of who I am. It's going to be what it is, whether it's commercially successful or not.
Yeah. And that definitely bleeds into some of the other points we mentioned. But again, like if you're doing it for life, you might as well make the music you want to make because you don't want to get to the end and be like, oh, I really was just sort of selling myself short creatively in order to try and reach this thing that I never got anyways. And, be proud of what you make. So I had one bonus point I wanted to make.
All right, go ahead.
Don't be an asshole because you're going to burn bridges. But what I mean by that is one thing I wish I had known, particularly in my 20s, is that you have to show gratitude and you have to if you're like me, sometimes you have to force yourself to show it because you might feel it, but you might also sort of take for granted that other people know that they're valued. And so I wish I had done a better job when I was younger of showing my bandmates and showing the people who produced my albums and showing the people who booked me in, clubs and stuff that I just simply appreciated them a whole lot. And I was very kind of closed off and I don't think it served me. And while I don't think internally I was an asshole, I think it might have come across that way. And I could have done a much better job of just showing people appreciation because then they'll be all the more bought in. Your relationships will function better. You can just get to the good work and stay creative. And yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I think a music career is very much a relationship career. They always say the music business is a relationship business. And in our modern internet era, a lot of times people can forget that at the end of the day, people are making choices and music and what people think of it is very subjective. But what's not subjective is whether or not they can stand working with you. Either you're somebody that people like to be around or you're not. I could do a whole episode of the podcast about what I've experienced in my own career about seeing people with so much talent that nobody wanted to work with and seeing people that were struggling maybe with the talent, me, get lots of opportunity because people liked, they're like, oh, this person, I can live on a bus with them. I'm not going to go crazy having to be in close quarters with them night after night. They can take feedback. I can play them something and they don't just shoot down my ideas. All those things are important in a music career because there's so much relationship and whether or not people can stand being around you plays a big part of that. And if you're somebody that's just self-interested and not interested in just being a part of the music community and lifting the whole community up.
Yeah, and don't let things go unsaid. That was my big thing is I sort of was like, well, of course I appreciate you. You're in my band. I didn't fire you or whatever. But that's a terrible way to show someone appreciation is just tolerating their presence and productivity. It's like I could have just forced myself to say, you know what? Great set last night. Or, oh my God, those parts you played on that album. I still listen to that to this day and it's amazing. Just
Yeah.
if you're like me, just force yourself to be more effusive with praise because forcing yourself up will probably get you to a baseline where you're just showing simple gratitude.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, anyone in music, no matter what point of their career they're in, they're probably feeling a lot of these same vulnerabilities about what they're doing. It's hard putting yourself out there night after night, even if you're doing it very successfully, or if you have big hopes and dreams and are starting from the bottom. It's hard doing that. And it's something unique that most people don't do in their daily lives. So remember, whatever you're feeling, chances are all those artists that you think are so confident and have it all together are probably feeling the same thing.
We do hear about so many successful artists who are assholes, though. So maybe this advice is bad. Maybe you should just be an asshole. Maybe that's the key to success. And whether you're happy or not, or confident or not, who cares because you're successful?
I thought those days died in the 80s.
I don't think so.
I've got a hot take to wrap things up. Here is my hot take. Nobody is going to care about your music more than you. And you need to understand that. So, as artists, when you're putting yourself out there, no matter who is listening and who your fans are, eventually they're going to move on to other bands that they want to listen to. And you're going to be like, my music is amazing. Why doesn't everyone in the world recognize it? But that's okay. You should love what you're doing. And no one's going to get behind you and want to support your music if you don't believe in what you're doing. So you're going to believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing. And the experience you get back from other people may not match that level of enthusiasm. That's okay. You need to believe in what you're doing in order to see success and go out there confidently. So don't feel frustrated or think that something's going poorly because other people don't mirror that same level of enthusiasm back to you. But you need to believe in what you're doing and get out there and promote yourself, because if you don't, they're definitely not going to catch the vibe of like, this is something cool I need to check out. So there you
Yeah.
go.
And that same point applies to the business angle of music too. Like no one's going to swoop in and make your career happen for you if you're not already believing in yourself and working really hard and just building something that's worthy of someone else coming in and assisting.
And that doesn't mean you have blinders on to think you're the most amazing artist that ever lived. That's not what I'm saying. But the idea that if you don't believe in what you're doing, it's going to be hard to convince other people to come along for the ride. That's the hot take.
All right. Well, at the end of this episode, I hope everyone is now fully confident in their own music and happier, better collaborators, better people. I think we did some good work tonight.
We did great work. Great work. All right. Well, if you have a comment or thought after all of that, something you've done to feel more confident about your music, what you're doing, or a way you're getting feedback from fellow artists or professionals in the industry, we'd love to hear about it. You can call our listener line at 360-524-2209, or you can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. Oh, also, I should say we really like the idea of creating a segment of the scam emails or terrible promises of success that we get sent as artists. So if you've been getting those, please send those along. We'd love to read them on the podcast, or you can call in and read it on the phone line. They're amazing, and we think it'd be fun to just create that segment. So if you've got those, feel free to share. It's just a
First,
good
please
time.
don't fall for them. And then second,
Yes.
call in and let us know what they are.
Yeah, it should not start with, "Hey guys, I'm calling because I just sent off my money to this person."
Although, if that's you, we'll have a laugh at your expense, but we would appreciate your vulnerability.
Yeah, if you fell for one of these or something that seemed like borderline and you went for it and you had a terrible experience, we want to hear about it. So let us know. And lastly, DIY Musician Conference coming to Austin, Texas, August 26th through 28th. You're going to want to be there. And if you can't be there, you can join in virtually. Tickets are $149 right now. It's a bargain. It's a bargain for all the great information you are going to get. And if you're there in person, you're going to have such amazing access to fellow artists and industry professionals. You'll learn a ton. You'll meet people. You will feel that musical joy we've been talking about.
That has been sleeping for several years.
Yeah. So we're excited to be back. And so we want you to be there. Head on over to DIYmusiciancon.com, get your tickets. And if you stay 2 nights at the hotel or more, we will give you your ticket for free. So all the details are on the website. Chris will be there. I'll be there. It'll be an amazing time.
It will. See you in Austin.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode, Chris. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll catch you next time.
See you then.